Next, I call upon Dr. Usha Kim. She is the chief of our Orbit Oculoplasty Services. Even though she heads the Orbit Oculoplasty Services, she's one of the very high volume cataract surgeons of our. She has done more than 100 surgeries in India on several occasions. And even the modern cataract surgery, which is called phacoemulsification, she does about 40, 50 in a day in the morning. And is a very accomplished cataract surgeon as well as a very accomplished oculoplastic surgeon. And she is one of the people who pioneered a lot of new technologies in her specialty, which is doing the plastic surgery of the eyelids and also caring for people who have tumors in the eye, both inside the eye and also outside the eye. And I actually requested her to talk about how we really can. You all heard about how Aravind cares for the patients in large volumes, in lakhs and millions, but it's also about caring for that individual child, not that family, how they go through that. I think we need to really support when a child gets a cancer, not only the child, we also need to support the whole family. I mean, many of these children belong to very poor families. They won't be able to afford because part of the treatment we won't be able to do. We need to have the help of other providers, and it's a very difficult situation. And we requested Usha to how we support these children as well as the families. Yes, Usha.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ardia sir and Dr. and Chakrapani sir for giving this wonderful opportunity. I hope I'm audible and the slides visible.
You're audible and slides are visible.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Dr. Ravindran, I think your net connectivity, you need to do something because a lot of that was unclear.
Yes, yeah, must be.
Yeah, the others were all very clear. Your connectivity is a little inadequate.
Fix it, sir.
Okay, please go ahead. Sorry for the interruption.
Right. So this is going to be a very different presentation. There will be some pictures which are not very pleasant, so you'll have to pardon me for that. But the whole essence is in the topic on eye cancers. So how we take care of these patients with eye cancers is what I'm going to be talking about. It's not. Yeah. So if we look at the patient outcomes of any particular treatment, it's often dependent on the evidence-based practice, the expertise with which we handle these patients, the economics, which includes the affordability and the accessibility for the patients, and the patient experience. All of these would have an influence on the outcomes of the treatment. I think I'm having the same issue so if you just to give a background, we see about 10,000 odd new eye cancer cases in India every year. So this is only through the registry that we are able to get these kind of statistics. But then what has actually happened is about 20 to 30% of them are in children. And one particular type of tumor is what I'm going to be discussing today. That's called the retinoblastoma, wherein we started seeing about 40 to 60 cases in a year. This was about 20 years back. Subsequent to seeing these patients, we realized that we needed to do something urgently about them. So in an eye cancer, the only options that we have are surgical removal of that particular tumor, or a portion of the organ or the structure. Then you may supplement it with chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and all other aspects which can support the treatment. But more importantly, there's also a very expensive investigation process, which all are not affordable to most of these patients who come to our doorstep. And unfortunately, in our setup, what we saw was most of them are from the lower socioeconomic group. So this tumor is called the retinoblastoma, which is an intraocular. When I say intraocular, it is inside the eyeball, and you will see like a white reflex as is visible in this particular child. and these are in different stages. So, in order to address this scenario, see, we did not have an ocular oncology department in any eye hospital at that point of time, which was about 20 years ago in India. That was a very new subspecialty in ophthalmology. So we had to mobilize a lot of people in order to address this cancer. So we formed a like-minded team which included people outside of the ophthalmology realm, which included all kinds of oncologists who had to deal with this particular type of cancers. It is not that they all needed to work on any particular case, but we needed to have support wherever and whenever necessary, because these cancers don't sit in the eye only, they might spread across. So we needed to have opinions and inputs from all of these people. So it was a team of like-minded people who were all of the similar age when we started with, and we all worked on this particular type of tumor together. So now, when we had a team working on it, we were able to provide the investigations, we were able to provide expertise, the knowledge, and the skill. But people often landed up to us like this. And please pardon me for this kind of a picture, but this is how the truth was at that point of time. People used to end up in our clinics with this kind of a presentation. So, what was it when we went through? What was it that prevented them from coming? It was purely because of lack of finances. So that was the reason why people did not turn up early. One, they did not even have the money to travel to the hospitals. Two, they could not afford any kind of treatment, which was way too expensive for them to get. So then what we did was, I'm sorry, there's some technical issue here. Just give me a moment. So we formed something called the Ring of Hope Fund, where we encouraged people to come to our hospital, where we set up a chemotherapy unit, which was the one of its kind in those days, way back in 2004, in a standalone eye hospital. We normally would have a chemotherapy setup only in multi-speciality hospitals, which were able to support any case of associated side effects or complications. But since we had a very good team supporting us, that is, as I mentioned earlier, a good support team, we were able to start off this chemotherapy unit in our own eye hospital setup way back in 2004. So when we did this, we were able to support a lot of patients, provide them surgery, chemotherapy, all at a nil cost or very little cost. It was almost absolutely free for them. But then whenever we had to remove their eyes, they were left with such a bad state with an empty socket. And so what we did was, with the help of Auro Lab facilities, we manufactured implants. So whenever we removed the eyeball, we needed to replace the socket with something which will be very similar to the eyeball. So the Auro Lab started manufacturing the implants on our request. And that was very affordable. In fact, it costed us only about 250 rupees. And this was positioned in the eye. And this was a state following surgery. Now, the other thing is, we have filled up the socket, but we still don't have an eye which will not create a stigma for these little children. So we went ahead and started making our own prosthesis in our own clinic. So this again was affordable. So when we started around the time, around 2005, we were able to send these patients only to Aligarh, places like Aligarh, where and Bombay, where it costed about 40 to 50,000 rupees to have an artificial eye fitted for these children. But then when we started making, we could custom design a prosthesis for about 2,500 rupees. And look at what difference it has made for these children. So an implant for 250 rupees and a prosthesis for 2,500 rupees was all that was charged for these children. But for those who could not afford these also, it was made absolutely free of cost. Now again, you can see what a difference it has made for this young lad. Now, after seeing a lot of cases which came to our doorstep, we realized that there were some of the cases which were familial. That is, it was running in their families. Either the mother or the father or the grandfather would have had this retinoblastoma. So we started seeing such cases in our clinical setup as well. So on one such occasion, we had one mother who had brought her child who had a bilateral, that is, a tumor in both the eyes. So this lady, on talking to her, we found out that she also had one eye removed for retinoblastoma earlier on in her childhood, and this son happened to have both eyes retinoblastoma, and she became pregnant with the next baby. So her question to us was, I have, my son has, will the next child also have retinoblastoma? See, already it is a huge economic burden and such a mental torture for this woman, having herself gone through it and her one child going through it with tumors in both the eyes. So we treated this child with bilateral retinoblastoma with chemotherapy, radiation, and whatever was necessary, and we could actually salvage one eye. So we had to remove one eye, and the other eye was left with good vision. So now the question to us was whether we should go ahead with the next pregnancy or should we, what should we do? So in order to address that, we started doing the research in our Medical Research Foundation, wherein we started subjecting the blood of the mother, father, the first child, and then we realized that there is a high chance that the next offspring, that is, the next child to be born, would also have a high chance of a retinoblastoma. Having this information well ahead of time, we told the mother to bring the child as soon as the child is born, so that if the tumor was small, we could treat the tumor, save the life of the child, as well as the vision of the child, which is exactly what she did, and brought her next child as early as 12 days. And this is how we started treating the second child. Now, this child, we were able to save the life of this child as well as the vision of this child. The second one also had tumor in both the eyes. So she was also subjected to chemotherapy as early as 12 days. Now, with this experience, we started exploring other situations. There were twin babies, one of which had retinoblastoma, and the other we were not sure. There was something like a scar in the eye on examination. And then we did not want to subject the child further and repeatedly for examination and anesthesia. So we ruled out that the possibility of having retinoblastoma in the other child would be negligible, only because we did the genetic analysis of the blood of the other child. Another situation where the child had retinoblastoma in one eye. Normally, the teaching for us was if there is tumor in one eye, it's often not inherited. But then, if the mutation is present in the blood of the child, there is a high chance that the offspring of this child will be affected. So this is knowledge that the child would have, and eventually as they grow, they would plan to do whatever is necessary. This is another scenario where there was a genetic mutation identified. In one of the eyes, the child had retinoblastoma. And since there was a genetic alteration in the blood, we followed up the child, and the child developed retinoblastoma in the other eye also. The story here is the father's blood was also analyzed, and fortunately, the father did not exhibit the tumor but had the mutation in the blood. which means there is a higher chance of the tumor occurring in the next sibling. So this is again a warning for the parents. So they would bring the child early if at all and the child is born with the tumor, we can salvage it. The other important aspect which we also achieved through this process was a girl who was treated by us 20 years ago wanted to know whether her offspring would have the tumor because she wanted to get married. And we did the analysis and her blood did not show any mutation. So we realized that there was no risk for the offspring, and this is where she is with her child with no tumor at all. This is another scenario where this young fellow who came back to us way back, who was there with us in 2004 when we started the chemotherapy facility in our hospital, he wanted to know whether he has any chance of having secondary tumors, which is a possibility with these kind of intraocular tumors. And when we did the genetic analysis, we found out that there was no mutation in the blood. And then we were able to convince the child that he's not going to have a secondary tumor. Now, we went one step ahead and we did a genetic analysis in a prenatal scenario. There were 4 members who were affected with retinoblastoma in one particular family. The patient and the mother had retinoblastoma. So the family wanted to know whether there is any risk of the retinoblastoma occurring in the growing embryo. So we did an amniocentesis and we found out that there was a mutation, and we finally had to unfortunately terminate the pregnancy. So we did an analysis in all our cases, and we found out about 120 different types of mutations, and of which 20 were unique to our setup. And this actually adds to the knowledge of the world literature. So with that experience, we set up the first clinical genetic testing center in our hospital. And I think till date, it's one of its kind. And we are also accredited by the laboratory services. So what is really important is we have 95% sensitivity, which is on at par with any other international standards. Most importantly, we were able to reduce the cost of the testing facility, which is actually $1,800 versus what we actually offer it for is about $250. And when patients could not afford, we are providing it free of cost. And most importantly, again, is the time taken. We just take about 3 weeks to deliver the results to the patients. Now, as far as the research goes, we've also had a lot of support from ICMR, from the Department of Science and Technology, from the Department of Biotechnology, Science and Engineering Research Board. We are looking at the resilience patterns in some of the tumors who don't respond, and the patients would have to succumb to the disease. We're looking at other treatment options. We're going beyond genetics, and we are also looking at alternative medicine. Recently, the Ayurvedic Research Foundation has sought our guidance and help in terms of treating these cancers also. With this experience, we're also taking it forward with other tumors in the adults also. So we've had a lot of publications with this regard also. So we didn't stop with just looking at treatment, a certain amount of preventive aspects and alternative treatments. We're also looking at helping out people who have been not able to, recover the vision. So some of them have minimal vision recovered following all the intense therapies. So for those, we help them with low vision aids. And for those who could not regain vision or have lost both the eyes to surgery, we provide rehabilitation facilities for these patients also. So on one such occasion, this little baby was brought to us with bilateral retinoblastoma, which means the child had tumor in both the eyes. And this young woman was married to this gentleman who had a bilateral tumor for which both eyes were removed in his early childhood. And since then, he's always been taken around. He's never walked by himself. So we realized that he needed to be independent, and we rehabilitated him on this particular occasion. And now he's on his own, independent, walking by himself. So until recently, in the past 15 years, we've treated about 1,700 retinoblastoma patients, and we have treated about close to 8,000 adult cancers through this Ring of Hope project, wherein we provide free treatment for all relevant investigations, chemotherapy facilities, which could be in the form of systemic or localized chemotherapy, lasers, cryos, and surgeries, reconstructions with implants, with grafts, prosthesis, ocular orbital prosthesis, rehabilitation, low vision aids. All of these have been provided through this fund, which is absolutely free of cost. Apart from that, see, the one way of motivating these children and adults is to celebrate them. These are survivors who we year on year celebrate. We find occasions to celebrate. We invite them to the hospital. We take them around in our facility. We also have a very good facility around the Aurolab. We have a farm, and we have children's park. We take them there. We spend the entire day along with the team who has been treating them. And this happens year on year, and which is the most look forward to event, both by the patients as well as by the physicians and the staff who work here. And the most important thing is, whenever the treatment is offered, it's usually in a group. So people look forward to the rest of the team members. It's just like a classroom facility where a group goes to get treatment. Here, the way we look at it is, the treatment is offered in a group where, so one could subsidize the cost of the other. When we open up medicines, it's for a group. When we have some advices given, it's for a group. So they feel like they're together in this fight against this deadly disease. And often the senior members, like in this particular photograph, you see a girl who is actually motivating the younger group. It's actually motivating the parents. So these children actually are survivors who do very well. So that gives the motivation for the parents, and they are encouraged to carry on with the treatment. And the compliance is very, very good, close to about 95%. So we also thank the Arvind Eye Foundation, who's been constantly supporting both on the research front as well as on the treatment aspect. And this is a team who's been behind in supporting all aspects of treatment and research. And as our founding chairman would often say, intelligence and capability alone is not adequate. There should be a joy of doing something beautiful. You can see how happy these children are. And we all enjoy doing this kind of treatment. And what we get is these kind of smiles on these young children. And we're always happy to see the children grow up. You see that young little boy sitting there in that corner, who has blossomed out to be a marine engineer today. And there's not been a year that he doesn't visit. He comes from Maldives. He's always there, happy to see all our staff who've been with us. And today he's a marine engineer. And here is yet another family. I owe to this family a lot, because they were the ones who triggered us to start the research project. This is the mother who had the retinoblastoma, the young fellow who had the retinoblastoma, who was getting treated, which is when she became pregnant with this young little girl, who now have blossomed out to be a beautiful family. What you can see is the house remains, the people remain, and what we see additionally is the happiness on their face. And yet another story which I'm always proud of. This is a young girl who came to us, who has grown with us, and who became a doctor, who has always been in touch with us, who's married and has sent us a picture of her little child too. There's been a lot that has been done, as Dr. V says, but there is a long way to go, and I hope we will certainly go a long way in this endeavor. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Usha, for that emotional presentation. taking care of these children is very, very important. I think it needs, not only the knowledge and skill on the part of the surgeon, but also put together a team, make all the facilities available comprehensively, and also deliver them, cost effectively, and also support who cannot afford all this treatment. So thanks a lot. I think any questions, sir?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ravindran. It has been a magnificent presentation of the wonderful work being done by all of you. I have always felt that here is a national institution, which I think a world-class institution we are really proud of. I have a couple of questions. I can read them out if you like, and then
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
one is that with your knowledge, in how many states are there vision centers? Any idea?
Tulsi,
Yeah. So from the government side, I think we know for sure there are three which adopted the Arvind's model in total. That would be Tripura, Chhattisgarh, and more recently Tamil Nadu. And then
So Tulsirai, what happened to that Jharkhand which we have gone together?
Yeah. Jharkhand somehow it didn't move. It didn't move, and it could have happened in Uttar Pradesh, but then elections came, governments changed. And otherwise, when Akhilesh Yadav was the chief minister, he liked this idea. He wanted to go ahead. But then on the non-government side, I think quite a few hospitals are now adopting or will be adopting this process of working. As of now, there are 8 hospitals are undergoing training now from different parts of the country. Yeah, this is something I think this will kind of grow exponentially over time.
There is a model where the MBBS doctors are also trained to handle some of these cases in addition to the technicians. Now, Andhra Pradesh has a large village level officials who are called health assistants at the Gram Panchayats. Almost now they're there in about 12,000 Gram Panchayats. Do you think that this kind of training will be helpful?
I think they can be trained for very broad screening. Which is also good, and which is also very good. Fortunately, with eye condition, the patient themselves know they have a problem in most cases because they know that eyesight is diminished from what it was. And plus, there are some simple tests that we can train them in. In fact, we do a one-day training for even lay people like village volunteers to do that very gross screening. So at that level, they can identify a person and say they got an eye problem, which is good enough to be seen at the next level. So definitely that level of training can be done. Yeah.
I will request the other friends to maybe to seek some clarifications before I come back to you with some of my own observations and questions. Dr. Prasad, TLN Prasad, he is a medical doctor who has worked for long years with Tata Trust. Dr. TLN Prasad. Probably he's not there. Mr. Venkateswarlu, my friend and batchmate. Mr. Venkateswarlu?
I put my comments over there in the box.
Yeah.
My only observation is how I wish all these doctors without glasses themselves. As one who believes in food as medicine, I also desire this Aravind Eye Care to do the research on preventive medicine without getting into the diseases. In any case, all the eye diseases, you are curing them. That's a miracle, unparalleled. And how I wish the entire universe adopts this system for general health care.
What he is saying is
Yes, sir.
medicine by food. The need for any glasses should be done away with. There is affordability. Yeah.
Yeah, the glasses myself, Tulsi, we are all wearing is part of the aging. We call it as presbyopia or near vision problem. I think because of certain changes which happen inside the eye, we have that. In addition, some of us also develop a hypermetropic error. It's again a part of the extension of the presbyopia problem. So, I mean, it's something inevitable. I think we need to do something beyond. How do we prevent this aging so that, because the eye lens becomes a little bit rigid, it's not as simple.
Mr. Venkateswarlu believes that aging is a disease, it can be prevented.
But I think there's a good point that he's making. I think as medical providers, I think most of them have a curative mindset, or they deal with the patient when they come to them. While in some conditions they can be prevented, but you have to ask that question: can this be prevented? And that ethos is quite strong in Aravind. Like for instance, he used to see a lot of children vitamin deficiency. So it gets aggravated when they get measles or diarrhea or something, and then almost overnight the child will become blind. So the only intervention for that was to intervene with nutrition. So in those days, about 40 odd years back, he set up kitchen gardens in the government facility. There was a place they had given. We used to admit the mother and child, teach the mother and nutrition. A lot of bad, wrong myths used to be there. If a child is having diarrhea, you should not give her spinach because spinach has got fiber, it will aggravate diarrhea. Like there's a lot of misconceptions were there. We had to kind of break them by being with them, to tell them we will take care if something happens. So now we are at a stage that, in fact, Aravind, we opened a children's hospital, general children's hospital, to deal with this particular problem. But now it is pretty much gone from Tamil Nadu. Same way, we also have been studying corneal ulcers, which requires corneal graft and transplant. And a lot of it happens through some small injury in the field while farming. And then because it is so small, they don't seek help. They put some leaf juice or milk or chicken blood or whatever is a local remedy they do, and then it gets aggravated. Then it becomes painful. Then it requires a corneal graft. So there we have now started a program of having the health workers administer a simple antibiotic ointment. And then that has completely eliminated the need for any of the intervention. So our corneal patients come villages have been dropping down quite a lot because of the vision centers and interventions like this. Like this, I think we are doing a lot even for retina work. Before we used to, for every 10, and of that 1 or 2 will require some laser. Because we're aggressively reaching out to them early, the proportions come down quite dramatically. Now, approximately 1 in 10 may have a retinal problem, and in that 1 in 10 may require some kind of a treatment. So I think it's a good way of thinking, which we are trying to put in place as much as possible.
Yeah, Mr. Vishwanathan, Pangapalli Vishwanathan garu. Would you like to ask any questions, sir, or make any observation?
Sir, it was not so much a question, but I feel so happy that the team of Aurobindo doctors, inspired by Aurobindo, are doing a wonderful job. God bless them. I was mentioning something in the chat box that have they brought out any material, say 4, 8 pages, etc., about the elementary fundamentals of eye care so that they can be widely distributed to teachers and students and other such groups so that we can spread a greater awareness. Exactly, it may serve a limited purpose of some sort of publicity for the good work being done by this Aurobindo team. But I want knowledge per se to be made available openly, freely through all our social media groups to say a wide audience. That was my, interest and concern. I'll be happy if any one of the team members can tell me if they have any material ready, can send a soft copy of that to our Chakrapani Garu. He will distribute we are about 200 or so strength now, and we are bringing out certain webinars, and in the webinars text below, we will be including this material. I care, contact Aurobindo. Here is the soft copy of some details and so on. This is my request, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So we have something, sir. We can share it.
Oh, please do. Please do.
Yeah,
Because earlier, Chakrapani Garu was, sharing his experience of having traveled with you to Jharkhand and other places. He was also explaining that how in primary healthcare centers, the people, the persons with whom it is manned, have also been given some training by you, and thus you are very slowly, very confidently, and very wonderfully spreading the awareness. But I think with 130 crores of people, and with illiteracy, and with the, government's what shall I say? Government's concern with certain other things other than health and education of the people. I was just wondering, can we do any supplementary effort? That's all, sir. Thank you.
sure, sir. I mean, we can share the students and we can share the material. And there was a question about preventing glasses. I mean, we are trying to do some work with the children. I think today's myopia or the short sight, it's a critical problem with children. I think it is very less common in rural area, less than about a percent. In urban area, children it's about 8 to 10%. And if you see Southeast Asian countries like Singapore, China, it's about 40-50%. Something it's like an epidemic proportion which can happen in India as well. It's something we are trying to prevent in our own children population.
Yes, Mrs. Rama, would you like to make any observations? You have a lot of experience dealing with
Yes. Thank you so much, Chakrapani Garu, for this great opportunity. I'm really overwhelmed to even attend. Can you all hear? To even attend an event with such stalwarts and such a feel very honored. Thank you so much. And where the nutrition is concerned, I was wondering, sir, if spirulina, which Tamil Nadu is quite a pioneer in, whether some kind of an intervention with spirulina has been tried out for the children. CFTRH has come up with some kind of a chickies for the children with spirulina, groundnut and jaggery.
Rama incidentally is a nutrition. So she has also had a lot of exposure to L.V. Prasad Institution as a consultant. And she has been in the field of nutrition for almost now 35 years. So please go ahead.
Yes, madam. We have done some work early on using spirulina, which is very rich in beta carotene and vitamin A. This thing, and we also did a lot of research to kind of document the impact of vitamin A intake on morbidity and mortality and so on. So based on the results, which I think we have study done about vitamin A can actually half the infant mortality rate. A major finding, which was then first questioned a lot by ICMR and others as to when the data was checked and rechecked and everything. And then finally, the vitamin A supplementation program got much more strengthened across the thing. So now today, we don't see much of clinical vitamin A deficiency. So definitely, if you do a serum testing and things, you'll find there is still subclinical vitamin A challenges will still be there. But somehow it is slightly moved out of the radar, at least in the southern part of the country.
Yes. Yes, sir. And actually, Mr. Vishwam was asking for details of the organization. You people are doing such yeoman and excellent service and work, sir. We should get the details to be able to mobilize some funds for you all from some international organizations where our Indians are heading it. From the Google, perhaps, where our picture is there. They should be send across some funds. Maybe we should approach them or something because they realize the value of your organization.
Sure, yeah.
Dr. Ravindran, I have a few more questions. Sorry for being very.
Yes, sir, please go ahead.
Now, there are these Meditech zones which are being set up by Government of India. There's one which is already there in Visakhapatnam.
Yes, sir.
And I understand 4 more are being set up all over the country. Now, do you think that there is enough focus relating to the diagnostic equipment of eye care in those Meditech zones?
Sir, I can answer this question.
Yeah.
Dr. Jitendra Sharma is sitting
Why is that?
Vizag. Yeah, it's really one of the best medtech zones in the country. I think it is because of the leadership. But this is a general medtech park, wherein many for all disciplines, people open up the companies. But I don't think any ophthalmic company is there, to the best of my knowledge. There are no ophthalmic company at this point in time in Vizag. There is one getting opened up in Chengalpet, Tamil Nadu called HLL Medipark. See, what they try to do is, these medical devices needs a lot of testing. So all the testing labs are nearby. And then this medical device needs sterilization. So each company need not go for sterilizer. So they try to put up a sterilization unit there. So like that, and then also regulatory advice will be needed. So these companies can go and approach them and then get an advice. So it is more of an ecosystem that they try to create so that the companies would find it easy to operate, and then they become more competitive. But as far as ophthalmology is concerned, I don't think any company is there in Vizag or in HLL, in Chengalpet.
Now, my other question is, you would have noticed, both you and Mr. Tulsiraj would have noticed that there's a lot of technology integration which is certainly needed in eye care. And this technology integration, is that happening insofar as the IITs, IIITs, etc. are concerned? Now, they seem to be doing a lot of work on both hardware and software. Is there some kind of an institutional integration between the requirements of the eye care and these institutions? Do you think that something needs to be done? I find that at least at the state level, there is no awareness.
Okay, see, there are instances where we have also worked with some institutions to bring out the product. In Tirupati Hospital, they've done some work, locally, and then they've done some, small products during this COVID situation to address that. But the institutions are also now opening up what is called a venture center, where they allow the professors to work about 20-30% of the time with companies to translate their ideas into a product. So Chennai IIT has one, NCL Pune has one. So these are all coming up now. In the US, this is more common in many universities, but now it is emerging in the country. So, but we are yet to see the result. But there is one product made by the IIT people, that is getting commercialized by the Agarwal Eye Hospital. And then, to the best of our knowledge, our Pondicherry Hospital worked with VIT to bring one innovative device to measure the field of view. Normally it's a very big device. The patient has to put his chin and then he has to be there for a long time. Now they made that as a virtual reality device that a patient can own, and then he can comfortably sit and operate. So these are all happening, but not in a large scale. But in the years to come, I'm sure this will become more popular and then more prevalent.
Yeah, Chakrabarti sir, in that context, I think the transformation that is required in these academic centers is to find that middle ground. Now, we work with a number of these projects with the institutions, IIIT and all that. For them, it is purely an academic thing. So they get some data, they publish something, this work did not work, and then they move on, both the faculty and the student. And over time, the industry loses interest of engaging them in that manner because they have almost no sense of urgency, no sense of completing something they take up. No, it is not. New paper comes, new faculty comes, everybody moves on. Change the structure to be brought about in these institutions so that there can be a much better synergy that can happen. So I think that's kind of critical. Yeah.
Why I'm saying it is, I notice that it is almost totally absent.
Yeah, it is. It is absent. Yes.
That's what I myself tried to probe a little, but I think it's not happening. Number one, particularly with value-based organizations like yours, you see, that's the concern that I have. And perhaps at Tirupati, you have an IIT, you also have your own institution. Yes. So I think that can provide a little more of, you have already established some linkages with the IIT Chennai. But I think over a period of time, with all the states having IITs, most of the states at least, probably this can be done. The next question, I'm sorry for asking too many questions, but the next question is, do you think that there should be a mandatory legislation for harvesting retinas after deaths, normal deaths?
So many countries have it. It's not mandatory, what they call as a presumed consent. That is, when a person is dead and there is no other relatives around or whatever. So if there is no statement saying that you cannot remove my cornea, it is assumed that they're given the consent. So this is very common in many of the advanced countries. So what we call as presumed consent. So I think having that alone is good enough. And I think I somehow feel the problem is now more with the eye care sector than with the community. Because if the eye care sector did this eye donation program more diligently and more rigorously, I think people are willing to give. I don't think that is really a problem. I don't think you really need a mandate. I think there will be enough and more corneas than what India will require. In fact, I did a rough calculation. We are roughly covering about 7-8 million population through vision centers. If you're able to get corneas from everybody dying only from those 80 lakh population or 1 crore population, we will have enough and more corneas for several states. So it will equal or exceed what is being collected across the country today. So the potential is there, and I believe the people are also quite willing to give. Only thing we'll need to develop the right way of approaching them, doing the promotion, and that will be much more sustainable than mandating it.
Okay, good.
Just to supplement that, today the cornea collection, 70% of that happens in 4 or 5 states. There are some, maybe like half of the states in India, it's not even happening.
I see.
People are willing to give, as Tulsi said, we recently done a study looking at the donors, why they gave it, and that's a control group of who were not donated. We went to their families and asked, but they are all willing to give it if provided they have the information.
This is a question requesting Dr. Usha. Now there is good news for her in terms of that Nobel laureate's work, CRISPR. Now,
Yes,
do you
sir.
think it will help you in your control of retinoblastoma? The genetic control, right, in the womb or even earlier.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The CRISPR, that technology for which
Yes.
they got the Nobel Prize this year, do you think it will be helpful?
Yes, sir. I listened to her. I listened to her the last year. She had given it in our forum only, sir, in the US. I listened to her talk, and I think it's something that everybody is looking forward to. There is a possibility, sir.
Okay, good. Now, my last question is, what happens, what about the impact of the online classes on eye care, particularly of children? Do you think some care needs to be spread? A lot of online classes are happening, particularly for young children. Do you
Yes,
think
sir.
something needs to be done?
Yes, sir. I mean, it's been postulated that there will be an increase in the rate of myopia, and what they suggest is that they should actually not continuously watch the monitor. They're supposed to break quite often, at least once in an hour. They're supposed to break for 5 minutes, and they're supposed to focus at a distant object. This is what is the general a teaching that we promote across for all the school children. So this will be the case for another few months for sure. So they are encouraging people not to constantly look at the monitors, but in case they have to be sticking on to the monitors for a few hours, they'll have to disengage for a few minutes in an hour and blink their eyes more often, and they have to look at distant objects for a few minutes and then come back to their monitors. It is not a very acceptable form, but given the scenario, I think we'll have to put up with it for the next few months.
Yes, sir. We also made a video. I'll share it in our YouTube channel on this particular aspect. We've asked myopia, children looking at these devices for a long time. What is its impact? There's a short video we have made for the children, especially for school. I'll share it.
Yeah, thank you. That will be really very helpful. That will be very helpful. Any other points from any of the participants?
Sir, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please, Mr. Srinivas. Professor Srinivas Reddy is the Dean of MBA, the principal of that MBA institution of the Sri Venkateswara University, and he's very close to your Tirupati Hospital.
Okay.
Sir, my heartfelt appreciation for Arvind Foundation and the people who are serving, sir. I really appreciate their great services, and for our group for organizing, especially Chakrapani Garu. Now the question is, we read the ads for some Blu-ray blockers, so eyeglasses, screen guards like that, because most of us are spending a lot of time before the screens. So are they really worth, or if they are really worth, is your hospital bringing them glasses for blocking the blue rays?
Usha, you want to answer?
So you can go ahead, sir.
Yeah. I mean, usually the ultraviolet rays is something we need to block. So if you're going to be in the sunlight, it is good. But I'm not sure how much of that effect you will have
Sir,
wearing
I'm
this
asking
kind of
about only blue rays from the screens, sir, not from the sunlight. From
okay.
the only from the screens. Say, for example,
Computer screens.
Computer screens. I don't think we have
mobiles and
any real.
computers.
I don't think we have any real evidence to show that because none of us
No,
use it. I have not seen anybody using it very intensively
that's the
being
reason.
promoted.
I saw only ads, sir. That's the reason why I'm asking for confirmation.
Yeah.
Do you advise?
Here there is no evidence that it damages so far. Tulsi, you have any information on that?
No, but,
Not really, Ravi.
Yeah.
Other than some instances of dry eye and those kind of things being on the rise because of not blinking adequately. But I think we will know the impact much later, I guess.
I see. So right now you are not advising those glasses for this.
Yeah, no, we are not advising. Only thing is
thank
not
you.
when constantly looking at the screen, it's not advisable. I think taking a break at least 15 to 20 minutes for a few minutes is all right. Looking at distance.
Thank you, sir.
Now that there is some network of the vision centers, do you think that more and more services relating to dental care, skin care can also be provided?
I think that I mean we really have to see what is the synergy there. Because suppose we take our vision center, adding anything will be impossible because of just the size. It is about 400, 500 square feet. And about 30, 35 people come each day. 2 people are working permanently. You have other stuff. So the real estate will not allow that. So it's a question of really figuring out how to do the integration. Maybe what can really happen is, and then what I feel is for things like dental, ENT and all that, the workload is pretty high. If you go down to our level of working, that is trying to reach everyone in need. Like that. Your dental units will be quite busy. So there could be, depending upon the real estate availability, positioning them nearby, or cross-referral platform. Those things may be much more practical, I would think. So otherwise, having multiple things, because many of these things require a very specialized skill and also very specialized equipment as well. And that comes with experience.
Sir, given your functioning, do you think that there is need for a drastic reorientation of the syllabus of the paramedical education and also medical education? Given the last infusion of technology and a lot of equipment and modern methods of investigation, etc.
Yeah, I think so. The whole IT field has got to become part of the training. Today IT is not part of the training. And also something completely non-technology is how the patient's expectations are changing now. So we don't have any with the patient, communicating with the patient. Now, how do you part of the curriculum at all? And that is what distinguishes today a good service provider versus another. So some of these things, I think, before it becomes an issue because of the patient expectations, I think people have to, it will be good for the curriculum to happen.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful having you again, making this very exciting presentation. And as always, I have very great respect for Dr. V. You remember, we have requested Jayanti Ravi and she came up with the ballot. And I noticed that you have done one more last year.
Yes, yeah.
Can you please tell us what's your experience with that?
We have been doing this every October, sir.
Yeah.
And I think 2 years back we had the centenary celebration. And during the centenary celebration, we did depicting Dr. V's life.
I'll be interested in this.
The public wanted it to be reenacted, so we did that 3 more times in different large halls, each time drawing about 1,000 plus public to come. And this was completely enacted by the hospital staff, and all the staff children, they were part of it. So it was very simple and very very touching. So that was done on his centenary. Otherwise, every year we have some event that happens, and the Jayanti Natarajan's event was one of the highlights.
Yeah, Jayanti Ravi, yeah. Now,
Ravi, yeah.
yeah. Now, what I would request is, if you have any videos which can be in public domain, if you can share them to the AP HRDI. Of course, I'm no longer there, but nevertheless, it's a training institution, and they can make use of them whenever it is possible. Can that be done?
Sure. Yeah.
Whatever videos you think can be sort of repeatedly mentioned to trainees over a period of time. They'll be training up something like maybe 1 lakh employees in the next 4 to 5 months. So it'll be an excellent opportunity to play up some of these videos which have a bearing on eye care and basic rudimentary precautions to be taken.
Sure, yeah.
Definitely, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir. It's a pleasure having you always.